Climate change is real. It's happening all around us on a daily basis. Renewable energy is the future, and Nedbank, as one of the key investors in the Aurora Wind Farm, know that all too well. We went to Saldahna Bay recently to chat to the key stakeholders in the Aurora Wind Farm project to find out how the commercial operation is going and how it all works.
Aurora Wind Power acts as the owner for the West Coast One project, and we really in the middle and the center of this project finance structure. So our role is to manage all our stakeholders and to engage with them to ensure that we operate a facility that is, generates power, that is safe to operate, and that fulfills all our commitments in terms of our lender obligations and our shareholder obligations. So the West Coast One project is a 94 megawatt facility. We were engaged with Vestas during the construction phase. They were our primary EPC contractor. I became involved back in 2013, so shortly after financial close. Initially with the team, I worked as the CFO, and recently I took on the role of CEO. We have a very good dynamic team, and most of them have since moved on to the O&M side, and they are sitting on that side, and they're responsible for the operations and maintenance.
Well, Nedbank is a funder of all sorts of forms of energy technologies, but in the last few years we've been highly committed in the South African renewable energy market. We've been funded as most of the transactions in the wind, PV, hydro sectors. The world is moving into a renewable space where the renewable technologies are becoming much more affordable and much more sustainable. And as a funder or as an institution, as Nedbank, we have decided or have a mandate to fund these renewable technologies all over the African continent. We've done some major projects in Kenya, Southern Africa. We've been the market leader in South Africa, funding the South African renewable energy projects in the REAP, or the Renewable Energy Independent Power Producers Program.
If you look at the cost of renewable energy today, the unit cost per kilowatt hour has come down dramatically over the years. Secondly, of course, we want to all move towards a low carbon environment, low carbon intensity in our energy generation, which obviously helps. South Africa is a country that's dominated by coal-fired power stations, and the advent of renewable helps us as a country to mitigate our CO2 emissions. Clearly, you can look at the cost of renewable power today, and it is dramatically cheaper than power produced by thermal sources.
We're going to take you guys to one of the turbines with a beautiful view of Paternoster. Okay. The reason why we're so adamant on the safety and security on site is because on the West Coast Wind Farm we have about, since we started with commissioning, we never had any LTI on site. After commissioning we basically went for I think from 2015 up to now, we've never had any LTI as well. So we basically exemplary for all wind farms in South Africa.
I think we've created a fantastic framework. The IPP office has been tremendously successful in creating an environment in which developers like ourselves, like NG, can come into the market, establish our brand, and build these renewable power projects. And I think that framework is there. It's now up to government to create the certainty to enable this policy to roll out, to enable more renewables to come into the country.
These projects are commercially viable in terms of the tariff-proven technology, the strong sponsors to build and operate these projects. It's lots of money involved here, so we do a lot of due diligence from the environmental approvals, the actual contractors, the operators, the owners of these projects. And so it takes us about 6 months to a year to literally package and for these projects to reach financial close.
So we generate power, we sell it to Eskom, and on the back end of that we are financed by 3 of the banks in South Africa, namely being Nedbank, DBSA and Investec. And really, so it's a project finance transaction, so they provide a huge amount of debt and we repay that over a period of time, and any sort of residual from that goes to our shareholders.
So within the turbines internals or up in the nacelle, we have what they call a drive terrain, and on the drive terrain we have a gearbox, a generator, and then a transformer in the nacelle for all our Vestas turbines. So your earlier question, from what you said, you understand kinetic energy. So kinetic energy is coming in, it's being converted into mechanical energy through a gearbox. From the gearbox, between the gearbox and the generator, we basically have a conversion as well from mechanical energy into electrical energy. Within the West Coast area, we basically have 6 months where we have constant wind, and irrespective of whether it is during peak hours or during off-peak hours, we are able to generate power onto the grid whenever Eskom or the single buyer offers needed. So the myth of or the skeptics regarding the renewable energy, I used to work on a CSP plant, and a typical example for a CSP plant, like your wind, that have basically any time of the day there's wind. On a CSP plant you have 12 hours of sunlight per day, and then you also have the capacity where you can basically store some of that energy and generate it after hours. So I don't think that the renewable energy, we don't have any energy storage. If the wind's not blowing, then we're not generating any power. In this specific area, 9 times out of 10 or 7 to 8 months out of the year, we have full capacity where we basically run at a capacity of above 40%. So that capacity factor is actually extremely good. We had our highest capacity factor on site since we started with construction of about 60%, which is marvelous according to me. I haven't heard of any wind farm that did above 60%.
The biggest obstacle for us at the moment is policy certainty. Whilst we have the regulations in place, it is very difficult in the current environment where there isn't certainty and there isn't the buy-in from the utility like Eskom to conclude power purchase agreements for further renewable development. And I think that is the biggest obstacle for developers like ourselves to roll out further renewable projects. I mean, look, at the end of the day, it has to be an engagement. It has to be a discussion between developers like ourselves. It has to be a discussion involving government, business, and of course the state utility Eskom. Until we sit together and agree a way forward jointly, I think it's going to be very difficult to go forward like we've had over the last 5 years.
So at full capacity, this wind farm would typically be able to give power to about, I'm just speaking under correction, plus minus 100,000 households. That is medium-sized households, okay? If you look at your your lower income households, you're looking at probably between 120 to 130,000 households. Typically. I think it would be big enough probably to power the Vredenburg Saldahna municipality. We're working basically in conjunction with the landowners. We have a fairly good relationship with the landowners, and yeah, as you can see, the farms are actually, or the sheep are actually coming to the vehicles. Yeah.
So the foundation that you see here, that is only the top part. At the bottom it spreads out. So it's about 20 meters in diameter and it's about 5 meters deep. So what you see here is nothing compared to what's buried under the ground, okay? And then, like I was saying earlier, each rotation is 150 rotations on the generator side. Okay, at the back, I don't think you can see it now, but from here you will see the aviation lights. That's just to warn any aircraft that please there's turbines around. During the day it's a white light, and at night it's red. The tip speed that you see there, it's about 300 kilometers an hour on the tip speed. So you will see now the blades will move into feather position. It's important that you look at that whenever it goes into stop mode, because at the moment the blade is more or less in 0, which is full production, and as it goes into 90, it releases some of the wind, and you will see now the angle of the blade as it changes. You will be able to see as it releases some of the wind, right? And you will also hear as it goes into 90 degrees, the noise that comes from that. That's obviously the resistance on the angle of the blade, the angle of attack of the blade. You will hear a lot of resistance. You will hear now if you stop it. So there you can see the different blade angle. That's the angle to make the airflow around and over the blade, and that's the production angle, right? We will enter the basement of the base, because the basement is at the bottom.
This project, I think it cost about 2 billion rand. So you would have been typical structured with a 70-30 debt equity ratio. So shareholders will put 30% of the cost and the senior lenders will fund the remaining 70%. And it will be a consortium of financial institutions lending into the transaction.
This is our lift, service lift. So the technician used this to access the nacelle. If the lift were to be out of order, you'll have to use the ladder system. That's the distance you'll have to climb if the service lift were to be out of order. This is the cable where the power comes from, up top, and it's being fed into the RMU, and with the RMU it distributes to the next turbine. So you can see here, this is 44, and it comes from T39. Then that's the UPS. If you were to have a power outage, you still have lightning, you still have the control system on, so you can safely evacuate. That's your fiber optic junction box, and that's the main control panel. From here, you can still see the wind speed, you can see the power output, you can see all the feedback coming from the components up top. It's maximum 2 megawatt, which is 2,000 kilowatts. A normal heater consumes about 2 kilowatt. So you'll have to multiply that by 1,000. So it's 1,000 heaters that you can run on one turbine. Yeah.
Fundamentally, how it works is that a developer will undertake the development of the wind farm at a point in time when it is ready to engage with senior lenders, commercial lenders that provide the debt into the project. So it's a combination of debt from senior lenders, equity from shareholders. Jointly, we use that to construct the wind project under an EPC contract, and then own and operate it for the term of the PPA, which is a power purchase agreement that is signed between the wind project and Eskom. So the power plant will sell kilowatt hours into the national grid, and in return Eskom will pay the tariff.
Remember, most of these projects are driven by government programs. So this is the Renewable Energy Independent Power Producers Program. We're currently in round 4, and there's been some temporary impasse on this, and hopefully that will be resolved soon. So typical recessions, to answer your question, it's over a period of time. These projects are long term. It takes many years to construct and build, so it's a longer forward-looking project. So even during recession, we should build power stations for the future. And remember, South Africa has a commitment for energy balance or energy mix in terms of our integrated resource plan.
When we walked in here, you saw that there were animals grazing in the field. So, the farmers, the landowners still utilize the land for the purposes in which they had it originally, for sheep farming. And the fact that we now have turbines on the land doesn't inhibit them to continue to farm animals. And in fact, it's helped them with the infrastructure, with the roads, with the development. So all in all, my sense is that renewable energy is a bonus for us as a country in terms of carbon emissions. It's a bonus for landowners in that they still have access and use of their land, but at the same time they have the upgrade of the infrastructure. So PPA is effectively a contract that says the wind power company will sell electricity into the grid, and in return Eskom will reimburse or pay for that kilowatt hours. Negotiating a PPA with a state utility like Eskom, given that we have done this now many times in the past, is a fairly standard and straightforward procedure. And in fact, the PPA itself is a fairly standard document, given, as I said, that we're now into round 4.5 of the renewable program. So Negotiating a PPA in our current circumstances is a fairly straightforward affair. I agree that if you had to come into a geography, into a country with the first renewable and sit across a utility who does not or has not been involved in an IPP type environment, I think that would be a fairly longer, lengthier process to get them comfortable with regards to what a PPA means, the risk allocation of the PPA, but in general it shouldn't be a difficult process.
Generating power for the grid is not the only function that the Aurora Wind Farm is mandated to fulfill. They also have a number of community enrichment programs running in the area to aid in the upliftment of the surrounding community.
We also have a local community investment that we also need to do over a period of time through the implementation agreement, where we have to engage in social economic development projects in the local community in an aim to make an impact and to assist where we can to make the lives of the people around us better. A bursary and merit award scheme is one of them. We select students from the local community and we really don't make a differentiating factor in terms of what they want to study and where they want to study, as long as they're from the local community. And we select students based primarily on financial need as well as academic performance. And again, I think education is one of the big and important considerations for us, because we believe that these are the people. They are the future. They are the ones who are going to grow this country and develop this country. So if we can start as early as possible to educate them, to give them opportunities so that they can be able to make that impact.
I went to university with no money to pay my study fees or my accommodation. The only things that were paid was my registration and my deposit for my accommodation, which was paid by the university itself. So I told my mom that this is pointless of me going to university and I can't pay for my fees. And I remember my mom told me, just go my son, believe, have faith in God that He will provide. So I thought, okay, I'm going. And the first week, welcoming week, Bridget called me for an interview and thought, yes, this is my chance. And so I met these two lovely women, Bridget and Miriam, and they interviewed me. And they asked me why do I need the bursary and why do I deserve it. And so I told them my story, and I told them that, yeah, my dreams and my goals. And so I got the bursary. But wasn't it for the bursary, I wouldn't have stood here before you guys telling my story.
I'm Jadaisa Salmon and I'm studying Education Intermediate Phases.
I'm Bridget Summerin. I study FET Education at CPUT Wellington.
Well, I struggled a lot financially last year because my father's a single parent, so he really sacrificed a lot, so the bursary really lifted that burden off of him. So yeah, it was really a privilege to get it.
The Aurora Wind Farm bursary program has given me the opportunity to grow and to become a better version of myself and to pursue my dreams with everything I have.
Mainly the impact it had on my life was also financially, because my dad's a pastor, so the money doesn't really come in there. So the bursary basically pays for my studies only. But it really took a heavy strain of my parents that don't have to pay that much money to them, because university is quite expensive right now. Yeah.
It funds us for our accommodation and our studies, so I think it's quite a boost for starting somewhere, and we really appreciate that they could offer this to us.
Yeah, no, it definitely helps. I mean, with the traveling to Potch is quite a lot of money, and it completely pays for your studies. So it definitely takes a burden off your parents.
I come from a really poor family, so it really helped me to take the stress away, and I couldn't have studied if it wasn't for this bursary.
If it wasn't for this bursary, I wouldn't have been able to go study. And even if I had other money that could help me, it wouldn't have been enough. So with this, I can actually finish my degree and maybe do honours and all that.
Okay, so as you can see, this is our Lowville Food Garden project. And this project, what we did in the very beginning is we did a community needs assessment process where we asked the community what is it that they want, to ensure that there's an authenticity around what we're doing. We're not dictating, we're actually building on what the community's vision for itself is. And one of the projects that they wanted to do was a food garden project. For two main reasons. The one is for a business venture, so eventually the farmers group that owns this project are able to sell their produce to the local community at cheaper prices than they would get at your bigger supermarkets and that sort of thing. So the concept behind the food garden is purely organic methodologies. And so as a result, there's no buying of expensive pesticides and fertilizers and that. The fertilizers are made by the people, by the community itself. They are trained in the methodology. When do we plant? So you don't plant plants that are necessarily will die in a particular season, but it's very seasonal. And it's sort of a natural process. So there's no wastage. We use everything that we can, and there's no continuous buying of any sort of chemical produce. And as I was saying, the second reason as well is a focus on nutrition, because we live in a community where people are poor and they don't have access to fresh vegetables that they can feed their children, that they can feed their families. So this project essentially assists in a source of highly nutritious vegetables for the community that you see around you. We work with some implementing partners, including Soul City Institute, an organization called Abalimi Bezakhaya, which is based in Philippi, in Cape Town, and they focus on urban agriculture. So together we've sort of gotten a group of unemployed, what we call local community gardeners, 10 of them, who are essentially being trained the different methodologies here, and who come here every single day and basically tend to their garden. So you have 10 people who now have access to a project, who are able to keep themselves busy. And I mean, essentially at the end of the day, you want your projects to be owned by the entire community. And what we found is happening very recently is that school children who are on school holidays have come to help out. Different groups of young people want to come and literally plant and water and dig. So the interest that's coming towards this garden is not only of the 10 initial group that we started with, but also more broadly. So what's really nice is that you also learn what to grow with what. So there's certain vegetables that grow best with other particular vegetables. But here we have kale, we have spinach. I'm actually looking around. We have some onions, we have carrots, we have cabbages, we have literally everything. And we also have a few herbs growing as well, your parsleys and basil and this sort of thing. So it's just the normal veggies that we would buy in the shop that's now available to the community.
Climate change is real. We have been primarily a coal and nuclear and coal producing country. But however, looking into the future and looking at the sustainability of our country and also creating an environment where people can exist on this planet in the future, renewables become a very, very important element to be able to secure that sustainability.
So NG in Southern Africa, we obviously have this Aurora Wind Power project, which is a 94 megawatt project that we're standing in. We have a 100 megawatt concentrated solar power project using trough technology that is currently under construction in the Northern Cape in Katu. And we have a multitude of renewable projects that are in the pipeline, in fact that have been bid under around 4.5 of the renewable power program, and we are waiting, as I said, progress on that from government, from the IPP office. And in addition to that, we have 1,000 megawatts of open cycle gas turbines in Port Elizabeth and in Durban.
I leverage off my team, and they really do everything. And as I said, the project finance structure is quite complex, and there's many elements to it and different stakeholders to consider. And my role is really to make sure that all pulls together, and that we have a collaborative and an inclusive stakeholder engagement strategy, where we are able to fulfill the different needs and objectives across the different stakeholder pool.
Clearly, the first thing we look for is it viable? Is it viable commercially? Is it viable financially? Is it viable technically? And the second thing is to say, do we have, is it in an environment, or is it in a location where it's going to be a benefit to the country? Is it where power is required? Is it where power is needed? And is it where power can be connected into the grid? So there's a multitude of factors. The fact that it's renewable, of course, means that for us as NG, it is something that we believe is the future. So automatically that it's renewables, we'll look at it immediately. And then of course, as I said, we'll go through a host of criteria to determine whether ultimately it is viable.
I've really learned a lot. I think I have grown a lot. What I love about the space is that it's large-scale projects, but ultimately it's managed by small teams. So you get to see so many different elements of the business that you wouldn't traditionally see in a larger company. And there's a lot of expertise that goes into putting a project finance structure together and really operating a wind farm. So you meet a lot of interesting, very dynamic, very smart people, and I always love interacting with people like that because there's so much to get from them.